Dr. Rick with an unboxing of Triphala by Whole Foods Market. So Triphala from Whole Foods Market. I think I did this with my video, The Invisible Organ. I just talked about a whole bunch of different supplements that helped with IBS and SIBO and MCAS. So if you don't know those acronyms, I'll put them in definition. That's irritable bowel syndrome, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and mast cell activation syndrome. All those things are a constellation of poopiness. We always say, and I think it's because we tolerate eating bad food, and most people go through the blowback of what bad food does. Mostly processed fast food kicks back at you. It tastes good here, but it feels bad here. And then your butt is a different story. Those of you who've suffered from hemorrhoids or bleeding ulcers like ulcerative colitis, that's not fun. If you haven't, you're asking for trouble, because eventually it gets to that point, and usually after your third or fourth issue, you won't want to do that anymore. And then you kind of put a rationale that, oh, that food must have caused this, I'm not going to eat that food anymore, until you go to the next party and then you forget, and then you have that 2 days on the toilet. My specific point was when I was in the Philippines, I think I had lettuce. I usually would avoid in a foreign country, and I mean, I'm Filipino. In any foreign country, I've always been taught, don't eat roughage, or don't eat things that have to be washed, because in developing countries, there's nothing wrong with the Philippines. I think there's great food. I love the Philippines, but in developing countries, even in certain parts of the US, you gotta be careful about the way people handle their vegetables. And in some cases, they don't wash their hands, especially now with COVID. But there's parasites that have been around for decades, centuries. And it used to be number one killer of the world was parasitemia or infection. In some parts of the world, especially developing countries, infection will still be number one. And there's still TB around some places of the world. I think that it's important to understand that the problems that we experience, or at least that we see here, that are probably considered normal, like the upset stomach, the crampiness, the gastroenteritis, the stomach flu, the bugs that we get, don't have to be that way. You'll occasionally have people that'll say they never had that problem before, and you wonder, wow, are you alien? It's because we probably abuse ourselves. If you talk to somebody who's eaten home-cooked meals made by grandma or mom or dad, and refuses to eat processed food, you'll probably not have that many problems with the gut until they go to college. So the problem is we're in a culture of fast food, but I don't want to divert too much. But however, the idea is Triphala. I used to recommend it a long time ago, probably 20 years ago, to people who had constipation, because it seemed to be this Indian herb that was, I thought, fiber. And if you had fiber, it would take care of constipation. That was the bulk thinking. So the bulk thinking was if you put fiber in, constipation would eventually move the gut. But since the gut microbiome project that we invested, your tax dollars and my tax dollars invested money to fund that project, it was a DNA extravaganza of trying to figure out what grows in a human belly, specifically the bacteria. And it was a great discovery. I cannot believe that some of my colleagues don't dive into that, because the information is overwhelming. And I'm going to discuss a couple things, but it'll kind of branch off the Triphala. So I guess I will just talk about this now. So let me unbox it now. This is Triphala. Here's the nutrition panel back here. I don't remember what it costs. I just stopped by Whole Foods to pick up something. I forgot what it was. And I said, hey, I might as well do some unboxing. No, those of you who know me as warrior patients, I usually go to Consumer Lab online. The serving size is 1, and that is 1 capsule. And there you go. So there it is. Not really a smell. I happen to have slippery elm, because I'm going to talk about that later. The combination here, fantastic, and I'll explain it in a little bit. But Triphala, again, is for the gut. It's an Indian herb. And in India, and I teach yoga, and I've studied Ayurveda under Deepak Chopra at the Chopra Center in Carlsbad, California. It changed my life. And those of you who have a chance, go out there. You don't have to learn yoga, but there's other things like seduction of spirit, there's meditation, there's silence. There's a lot of great things that you can learn by just being taught from Deepak and the other teachers at the Chopra Center, but it was life-changing. I'm very appreciative of what Deepak has provided for the world. He's a sage. He's translated ancient information from India into medical jargon and then translated it from medical jargon into layman's terms. Here's what I'll start out with as far as news or information. This is just the modulatory effects of Triphala on the gut. It's helpful. This just talked about how if you use Triphala, and it's just a very basic study, if you use Triphala, it will affect certain bacteria in the gut. Now, the Gut Microbiome Project delineated that there's about 4,000 different species of bacteria in the gut. And there's also protozoa, there's also viruses, there's also fungi. And that whole milieu equals about 3 pounds of living material. I'm not talking about poop, I'm talking about living material in biofilm and bacteria, 3 pounds of it. So think of it as slime. If you go to a pond and you get pond scum and you lift up that pond scum, not necessarily soil, but pond scum, that 3 pounds of that exists in your small intestine and colon. Mostly in your colon, but it's diffused throughout the small intestine a little bit. You don't want too many bacteria in your small intestine, and I'll explain why. You want all of that in your colon. That's where the magic is. That's the house. In fact, you have these outpouchings in the colon called the haustra, and that's because you're supposed to be able to expand and hold your poop for when you want to dump. But it's also because that provides the shelter for the bacteria, the protozoa, the fungi, and the viruses. And that milieu actually shapes your metabolism. It also shapes your emotion. That milieu is a living, living organism, and it has to be fed. So it's usually fed by leftover remnants of your food. You would guess, is it meat or is it plant? What is it fed by? Usually it's plant. And that's where it gets to the soluble and insoluble fibers. When you eat something, say, you can't talk about beans. Beans always have a gassy formation, but if you eat something that's insoluble, that just passes through, roughage is good because it gets to the colon and think of it this way. I said there's 4,000 different bacteria. Well, think of each of those species wanting a different food source. So there's probably about 4,000 different plants that are available on Earth. Probably more, truthfully, I have to research that. But if you just have lettuce as your only source of plant, you don't have any seeds, nuts, legumes, lentils, you don't have anything like that, dark leafy greens, then you're only feeding one of the 4,000. That's not good, because if that one of 4,000 different bacteria happens to be the bad one, then you're going to have gas, and all the other guys get starved out, and they can't continue to survive. So their populations die down, and the one guy that loves lettuce just blossoms. Now, if that happens to be a good bacteria, okay, that's cool, but hopefully that good bacteria will take care of cleaving estrogen, will take care of healing the lining of the colon and stopping cancer and healing muscle when you exercise and calming down the brain. Yeah, all that stuff is important. But if you don't feed the bacteria, you will eventually have a problem. That's why I worry about my guys doing pure carnivore, because eventually those bacteria are going to want some fiber. So I digress, but let's move forward. The idea with different uses, as I mentioned, has been examined by different doctors, and you'll see Deepak is here, my buddy Deepak, my teacher Deepak, and this is great. And I as you know, I rifle through these. This is a picture, so this is a graph, and the graph shows slippery M and Triphala. And what is this graph showing? It shows that when you introduce these two into the gut, into the diet of a person, it feeds certain bacteria that make short-chain fatty acids. For those of you who are keto practitioners, you'll know that you want to sometimes have L-carnitine around, or you want to get long-chain fatty acids and medium-chain fatty acids into the mitochondria, and sometimes you can facilitate that with carriers. You usually can't eat short-chain fatty acids. They have to be made. So you can get the medium and the long chain in your foods. The short chains are made in your digestive system. And the short chains are probably more important than the long and the medium ones. So fatty acids are really important. The short chains are very, very important for healing. And when you don't have enough healing, you can actually denude the lining of the gut. So here's another study that shows the power or the beauty of having short chain fatty acids for, say, taking care of Crohn's disease, taking care of ulcerative colitis, taking care of irritable bowel syndrome in case you have it, or I'm not sure if it takes care of hemorrhoids, but you have to have short chain fatty acids. And it's also hypothesized that if you have the short chain fatty acids created in the colon, they also go everywhere else. And they help mitochondria, they help brain function. There's supposed to be a direct relationship between gut and brain. So if the gut is comfortable, functioning well, then the brain is calm. If the gut is bloated and achy, the brain is on fire. You probably experienced it. When your gut is flat, not hungry, and functioning well, and you don't have to go, and you feel kind of full, but not too full, you're good. When you're bloated and you're distended or you're crampy, you don't want to do anything. And somebody asks you, like, can you figure out this calculus problem? No way. So there is a relationship, and some of us just ignore that, oh, the gut's just for digestion. You know, in anatomy, in medical school, anatomy is like, what's the gut for? It's just a tube. It's just a tube for absorbing stuff. The heart's important because it pumps blood, and it's a muscle. The skeletal system is really cool because it holds minerals and it supports you. The brain is fantastic, and the gut's just a tube, but it's not just a tube. It's probably more important than all the other systems. So, and we bastardize it, and we just hit it with antibiotics over and over again. So the short chain fatty acids, that we'll have if we don't eat the right foods, you can substitute with this stuff. I'm not saying if you're if you're carnivore or paleo that you should just use this. You should always use whole foods if you can, but if you're in a bind, you might want to add that to your problem, or not your problem, to solve your problem, because you will produce more short chain fatty acids. Now, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not like you take a pill and then your bowels are great. You have to tease it out. Now, in addition, with Deepak's other study, and he's done a lot of studies, this guy is a sage. He translates everything into medicine, puts his name on a whole bunch of stuff, just like Andy Weil, my other teacher, of a good gut and a bad gut. This is a small intestine with its villi. Villi are finger-like projections that extend off of the intestinal wall. And then there's this lining of biofilm that sticks over or stays over those villi, and then you have the bacteria that sit in the biofilm. Well, if you don't have enough biofilm is produced by bacteria, and the bacteria, if they don't have biofilm, aren't going to stay anywhere. And if there's no biofilm, you just have denuded one cell, columnar cells, and they don't work well. So if the columnar cells are irritated and they're bleeding, you're not going to absorb anything. So those of you with Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, or just diarrhea because you have food poisoning, this is how your small intestine looks, and that's why food goes right through. Because remember, underneath here is a muscle. That's all 20 feet of small intestinal muscle, and if this is all irritated, that muscle just goes, and it just pushes everything down because it doesn't want to, it's like hot potato, it doesn't want to handle any food. Now, technically it's vomit. It's because the stomach takes solid food and it, like a blender, turns it into liquid, vomit. And the vomit goes through the upper part of the small intestine. It meets with digestive enzymes from the liver, which is bile, and the pancreas, and it emulsifies it, it breaks it down, and then it goes through that 20 feet, and it slowly turns in one direction that way until you've extracted everything over the course of a couple hours, and you just dump the rest of it into the reservoir, the colon. The problem is when it goes backwards. That's not good because bacteria are going backwards. You don't want too many bacteria in here. You just want a certain amount in here. If you have every bacteria in here, especially if it's denuded, you'll actually have the bacteria go into the bloodstream, and metals go into the bloodstream, and food that you don't want going in, you go into the bloodstream, nickel go into the bloodstream, and that's how you develop allergies. So even gluten. So that's usually what happens is This barrier is supposed to stay intact. If it doesn't stay intact, you got a problem. And if you heal up, cool, you get your biofilm back. But if you go through this constant cycle where you abuse your belly on the weekends because you have too much alcohol, and you heal it, and you abuse it on the weekend, you heal it, you'll be just as bad as the guy that has amoeba for 2 months. You have to take care of the gut, and you have to pamper the gut for fear that later on you'll have allergies, you'll have autoimmune disease, you'll have rheumatoid arthritis. And if you have a gene in you because of mom, dad, or uncle, or grandma, and you ask it to come out, that is not good. We have to repress our genes that are bad, not turn on the genes. So that's why you have to eat healthy, exercise, not drink too much alcohol, get some good sleep, and have some relaxation practice and take care of stress. The cool thing with food is that lining that I showed you, if you do damage it, you can use medicines to fix it. It'll fix itself, but food will fix it. Food does work to give you the macronutrients to build muscle, give you the building blocks to develop more neural tissue, to heal wounds, to grow if you're a kid. It does work, but it also heals the gut. So those of you who go through, even if you go through polyp removal or you have your colon removed, you can still manipulate the bacteria, the microbiome in your gut by using food. So we have since the Gut Microbiome Project, we've had everybody that has an antibiotic for a cough, cold, or a skin infection or COVID. You're supposed to be on, my usual before was, if you take an antibiotic from me, make sure you take a probiotic for the month or 2 months after the antibiotic. I used to always say that, but when the data came out that food actually, the data shows that if you give the gut really good food after your antibiotic exposure, the bacteria that was there before the antibiotic will bloom again. You'll recover the same diversity as before the antibiotic if you feed the right food. And it has to be, unfortunately, it has to be plant-based. I shouldn't say unfortunately, that's a good thing. But I know a lot of people don't like vegetables. Probably a lot of people like fruits. Not too many people like beans. But you just have to learn to cook them right. And if you look at the blue zones, it's legumes, it's beans, it's a lot of fruits and vegetables. There's also a lot of fish from the sea, it's meats. They actually drink wine in Ikaria, Costa Rica. I'm sure they have more fish in Okinawa, Japan, more fish than beef. But there's a plethora of different things. So you don't have to be vegan, but by the same token, you don't have to be carnivore. I think these camps have developed over time because our society, America, is so bad with our eating. We wait until the last minute, and when it's like you're 40 years old and your doc says, okay, you have a cholesterol issue, you're 50 pounds overweight, we're going to give you a medicine, then there's a last minute hurry to change, and to do a rapid change is really tough. So you see everybody going to the extremes. Veganism, where they drop any diet you do, whether it's vegan, paleo, carnivore, keto, fasting, intermittent fasting, prolonged fasting mimicking diet, anything you do where you concentrate a change will usually lower your total calories per day. Just by caloric restriction, you'll win because we eat too much. We eat too much crap. So just by paying attention to your food, you will lose some weight. So the question is it too late? Are you too deep into your crap to lose weight? No, if you want to lose it for a wedding next month, forget it, man. Go to a tailor and get a bigger suit. So if you want to do this properly and not look gaunt, because I've heard a lot of people tell me, oh, I lost 30 pounds, because I'll tell them, if you want to get to a good BMI, you might want to lose 30 pounds. I'm not saying you should do that because it has to be done properly, but I'll usually have the rebuttal saying, well, I lost 30 pounds, but everybody told me I look sick. That's because you lost muscle. When you lose weight too fast, you will inherently lose muscle. And when you lose muscle, you look like you're 80 years old. I've lost weight before, and I've been told, one of my patients told me I looked gaunt. If you've ever seen a bodybuilder, like a week or two before a bodybuilding competition, they'll look pretty taxed. If you see them right after the bodybuilding competition, when they start fattening up again, then they look good. They're big, you have muscle, you have tone, you have definition, you don't have the belly, you still have your cuts. So there's a fine line between losing weight and then losing muscle. I want you to lose fat. I don't want you to lose muscle. So that is the way. In fact, longevity can be defined by low pulse rate, low blood pressure, low BMI, but it can also be defined by how fast you get up from lying down on the ground and your jump height. So I think muscle always has to be preserved. The more muscle you have going into your 60s, 70s, and 80s, the longer you live, unless something happens catastrophically. So, but then if you're fast, you get out of the way of the car and you'll jump out of the car before it falls off the hill. So bottom line is that you really have to pay attention to what you eat early on. So stop the crap. It does make a difference of what you eat, but it also makes a difference that you pay attention to the 4,000 different bacteria. These are the bacteria in one of Deepak's studies. And the heat, this is a heat map. So it shows that all these bacteria were studied in the two papers I just showed you. And those of you who have bloating, it's usually because of methane or certain bacteria that produce gas. So the key would be if you can figure out which bacteria produce gas and try not to feed those bacteria, and you find out which bacteria don't produce gas and you feed them, you'll be golden. And we are getting to that point. In fact, these two boxes, this is Genova Diagnostics. I'm going to mention this now, Genova Diagnostics. And I'm not going to go through how to do this test, but and unfortunately it's not paid for by insurance. But if you become one of my warrior patients, I'm not going to pay for it, but I can get it for you. But it's very revealing, because if we can figure out if your gut microbiome has gas producers, we know what to do. I mean, the idea is that, and if we don't have gas, then we'll look at other things. Then you have to have a colonoscopy and a couple other things. But I'll put a link down below for how to do the test, because there's a couple of videos from Genova on gas testing. And there's also a couple of videos from Genova on just checking your poop. This is great too, because it will check to see what kind of bacteria you have, if you are producing short-chain fatty acids, if you're producing other immunoglobulins. I think this is great. So the government came out with a study, and they know now the profile of somebody who's healthy and not healthy. And if you're not healthy, and it could be many different things, if part of your symptoms are the gut, and part of your symptoms are the brain, part of your symptoms are the lungs, part of your symptoms are the muscles, and you're not sure where to go, I would do the test. That way, at least it directs you to say, target this system first. Otherwise, you're targeting every system, and you're going to get lost. If you go to an integrative medicine doctor, usually we'll take the time and try to figure out which system is priority. If you go to a regular doctor, they'll send you to every specialist in the world. And the specialists don't talk to the primary care doctors. They'll send them a letter. And the specialists don't talk to the other specialists. They'll just say, nah, that's not my specialty. Just go see him. And the other guy will say, that's not my specialty. Go back to your primary care doc. I had somebody call me saying, I need to get you a medical cannabis card because my orthopedic surgeon said I can't have any more pain pills. And that's fair. But at the same time, it's like, what happened to anti-inflammatories? What happened to physical therapy? What happened to non-narcotic pain relief? The orthopod just told him to take cannabis, and he just dumped him on me. That's not cool, but that's the specialties nowadays. Be careful. So this is a test by Genova. So if you get this box where you send your poop in, and I'm sorry, I don't remember how much it costs, but I'll put a link down below and you can check out Genova's site. You get a poop analysis, and this is really cool because it'll tell you if you have enough short-chain fatty acids. Here, insufficiency of fecal acids. The total short-chain fatty acids is low. It'll give you a big red. It'll even tell you it's butyrate that's missing. So it'll also tell you about if you have bad bacteria, parasites, and it'll also tell you about if you have the balance. So this is really cool because it tells you this is not all the bacteria like this. It doesn't check every 4,000. It just checks the most important ones. So it'll give you if you have too much or if you have too little. And if you have too much of the bad guys and too little of the good guys. So it's really nice. You can dial it in. Now the question is always, okay, if you're missing the good guys, how do you reproduce the good guys? Because you can't always get Akkermansia. Or if you have a bad ratio of one to another, you can't really do that. But you can change your food. If you change your food, then you might be able to change the ratio. Those of you who are stuck on a certain weight, guess what? I've talked about this many times before, but if you have a plateau that you hit and you can't shake it, and you've done everything, you've cut down your calories, you're exercising your head off, you've done everything, you're on hormones, you might want to look into the gut. There's information that shows that the ratio of different bacteria might be the cause for obesity. So there's two different ratios. There's a ratio of Prevotella to Bacteroides, and there's a ratio of Firmicutes to Bacteroides. So if you change around the ratio, you might be able to break your plateau. You guys should read this. Those of you who are plateaued out and you can't get past your stuck point, you might want to start messing around with the bacteria. So again, most doctors will say just take a probiotic, but there's only so many probiotics, and usually it's only Bifidobacter or Lactobacilli. I've done videos on Saccharomyces, which I think is more of a rescue yeast. It's considered a probiotic, but it's considered, I think it's rescue because it decreases IL-6, which is an inflammatory marker, a cytokine. So that's why I did it during COVID. I put my video out there to help with COVID. But it also lays the foundation for other probiotics to come in. So I think of it as a scout. If you take your Saccharomyces, it's the scout troop before the army comes in. It'll lay down nice biofilm. It'll take care of decreasing inflammation, and then you can take the other guys. Or if you have, hopefully, your diversity is still there, your seeds are still there of different colonies. If you start feeding the different bacteria, different foods, you might be able to have them bloom one at a time and hold the bloom up. Now, you can't just take a whole plethora of different vegetables and fruits and nuts and seeds, because if you're not used to it, yeah, you're gonna kick back and have some problems. I would do a little bit at a time. That's why this has to be teased properly. You have to keep a journal, because Stephen Gundry put in his plant paradox, he found some plants are irritating, and you never know. You might have, those of you with MCAS or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, you might have a food intolerance. So you have to be careful, and it does behoove you to maybe get a food allergy test beforehand. You avoid the ones that you're allergic to, and you just try to send in a couple, maybe a different focus every couple days. And there's a lot of fruits and vegetables that are out there that you can try. If you have scoured the Jewel-Asco or there's no more Dominick's here, but there's Pete's, there's Woodman's, there's Whole Foods, a little bit of Mariano's, definitely a couple things at Fruitful Yield too. If you scour them, and then the farmers markets are going to be opening up, support your local farmers, please. You start scouring them, maybe CSAs, you might be able to test out your taste. You might be able to test out your cooking skills. I don't know if I would, you can even get those there are ordering companies that will drop off some foods that you can prepare. I've tried a couple, they're okay. They ship them to you on dry ice, and it's nice. If you don't have time or you're not a great cook, they give you cards and you can follow the instructions, and it's kind of cool. And there are some that already prepare it for you, but that I don't know how they prepare it. So the bottom line is that the idea would be the gut is a very complex organ, and it is involved in all the other systems. And unfortunately, it is a communication between the inside world and the outside world. The skin is that way, the eyes are that way, the mouth and the nose are that way, but the gut is also, the entire tube, if you think about it, is in constant contact with the outside world in the form of food and beverage. And then when you take that in, it has to deal with that exposure. And sometimes some of those things from the outside world are caustic, are irritating. So the gut has to be able to take in good stuff, but also has to be able to defend. That's a dichotomy. That's really complex. So I think we take it for granted. You know, we take it for granted that the skin keeps stuff out, but it lets moisture in, and you're allowed to sweat, but you don't want to let too much out. So, and you have to thermoregulate. That's kind of complex, but the gut is so much more complex than that. And then we just destroy it on the weekend. Oh yeah, I'll just have jalapeno because it's fun. I'll just have wasabi because it tastes good and I can take it. Yeah, you know, if you're going to pay for it, when you pay for it, you're destroying stuff. And those little guys, the 4,000 little guys, if you kill 1,000, you have 3,000. But if you keep on killing 1,000 every decade of life, you're not going to have much by the time you hit 60, and then you're in the hospital. And once you kill off the gut biodiversity, because it starts when you're a kid, as you pass through mom's vagina, lactobacilli, and as you breastfeed, bifidobacter. Those are your two exposures that mom gave you. Hopefully mom is healthy, but if mom is not healthy or mom is given massive antibiotics, she's also had her diversity wiped out, and it's just down the line. But sometimes it gets to the point where it's irrecoverable. You can't get back. If you've damaged your microbiome too severely, it will never come back. And then you have to have a fecal transplant. Yes. You have to get a colonoscopy and they take somebody else's poop and they put it inside you. And that does work. It works for C. difficile infections. It works for obesity, but I'm having a problem trying to find a GI guy who will help me do that. And I think it will help with autoimmune disease and just definitely SIBO, but you have to have it covered, and insurance doesn't really cover it. So we have to have a reason to do it. And then as we finish the reason, scoping for cancer, if the GI person is nice enough, they'll dump the poop in there. But it's theoretically, it's clean poop from a very vetted donor. So it's either that or you eat capsules that have been kind of cleaned. I don't know how they clean those things. But anyway, so that's Triphala, and I'd give it a try. It's usually 1 to 3 servings a day. If you have issues already with a leaky gut, you might want to start very slowly. And you guys that are IBS, SIBO, or MCAS, you probably have leaky gut, so you might want to ask your doctor or become one of my patients. I'll put a link down below for my clinic. And then slippery elm. Just like the picture said, these two together will help increase your short-chain fatty acids. So that'll be the first part of your healing. If you're not sure if you do have short-chain fatty acids or not, get the Genova test. I'll put a link somewhere on my video. It might be a bunch of links, but hopefully this gives you a couple of ideas of how valuable this stuff is. And if you're okay with all that other stuff, you don't have any medical problems, and you just want to have better health, maybe better gut health, try the Triphala. I think it'll be a nice option for you. And if you have any comments or questions, put them in the comments section down below. If you tried Triphala from another company, I also like Now Foods products. I love them because they're local. Whole Foods, I just picked it up, but again, it's not on Consumer Labs. Those are my 2 favorite places to go to. Please put them in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, pass this to other people who are suffering from bowel issues, and I'll see you at the next video.